So good afternoon, everyone. I am the first reporter of the Group 10, and our topic is all about debt and equity capital. So here are the key terms. First is the debt capital. It is represented by funds borrowed by a business that must be repaid over a period of time. So debt capital is utang siya nimo nga bayaran nimo sa depende sa kanang kasabutan dito ninyo na inyong bayad ng specific date bitaw na. Equity capital represented by funds that are raised by a business. Amortization is a payment of long-term debt by installments. Example sa amortization is loan amortization. Loan amortization is from the word loan is pang long-term jud siya mga utang. So ano siya example sa amortization? Indenture is a written agreement between the corporate debt issuer and the lender, setting forth maturity date, interest rate, and all other terms. Security is a form of attachment to property. So, need na security sa namin mga permahan ng mga property or magpirmahan sa mga nasabutan bali na kung mag-loan kaya na something. Financial distress, a better phrase than bankruptcy cost. Readjustment, the fundamental changes in the capital structure. So maturity is the amount of your obligation or principal plus interest required to be paid in a specific date. So equity holder is siya owner na naay siya i-share sa capital sa ilahang business. Ano siya itawag equity holder? So understanding debt and equity capital. So debt is anything owed, kanang utang. In short, ang debt is utang, especially a sum of money that one person owes to another. Utang. So ang equity is a equity capital or financing is money raised by a business in exchange for a share of ownership in the company. So sa gingon kanina sa key term na ang equity capital is represented by funds na na-raise sa ana nga business. Also, equity capital refers to money that you and any business associate inject directly into the operation. If your business is incorporated, anyone contributing equity capital would receive shares in the business. So features of debt and equity. So there are two types of features. Features of debt and features of equity. So features of debt is a special type of debt called secured debt. The debtor promises that if the debt is not paid on time, kung hindi ka kabayad sa katong yung nasabutan na kanang nga date is the creditor may seize specified property from the debtor before a suit is brought.
Nakapag-out ka ng property.
Kung dili mo mabayad kung para na natin if the value of the property is not enough to pay the entire debt, the creditor may then sue the debtor for the remaining amount. So pwede siya kanang kasuhan bitaw sa katong nagpautang kaya dili mabayad bitaw siya ng specific case. How mo barya ni mo ni tanan nga kuan kani nga imong kanang giutang nimo. So most people purchase such expensive items as homes and automobiles through secured debt agreements. Diba? Kay sa secured debt agreement man is kanang ang utangay dira is kanang dili bitaw para sa uban nga susunod nga bayad sa mga kulang na murag bali ana nga nasabutan nila nga date is mo na jud to ilahang barya, mo na jud to ilahang kanang mo na jud to ang date nga mabayad sila. So time limits on collection of debt. The courts ordinarily state that debtors should pay their debts even though the creditor does not demand payment. Kaya syempre, nasabutan naman yung good kung bisan na hindi naman ningin ang atong yung nautangan, ubayad dyan ka sa yung obligation. But if the creditor makes no effort to collect the money within a certain number of years, the debt becomes barred by a statute of limitation and can no longer be collected. So the second one is the features of equity. So there are two types. There are two key sources of equity capital for new emerging business: the inventors and the venture capital firms. Typically, capital investors provide the capital secured by assets to young private companies, either the potential for rapid growth, such as investing covers most industries and is appropriate for business through the range of developmental stages. So, investing code is a new or very early companies inherently carries a high degree of risk. But venture capital is a long-term to patient capital that allows company the time to mature into profitable organizations. Kanang bali ang kanisang venture capital is long-term, very lang siya utang. Pero long-term na ba, by the word capital, kanang pagdugay ito yung kuhan, kanang yung capital na value mo.
Kurang tugay ka para makabayan? Or ang tugay ang amount niya kasi
Pwede na na.
nagdala po ang amount.
Tugay siya. Patient capital. Allows, kanang mature, di ba? Is kanang kuhan siya. Kanang long-term po ang maturity, kanang bali. Bisabot rin hapon na siya nga po ay. So, the difference between debt and equity capital. So, sa akong gingon ganina is ang debt capital is represented by funds borrowed by a business that must be repaid over a period of time. So, ang debt capital is utang siya nimo pero hindi mo siya capital. Iutang nimo ang imong capital. Yan na. Pero, kani siya, di ba? The funds borrowed by a business. Pero anong debt capital nga kato yung giutang nimo is barya gihapon nimo siya period kanang sa inyo na rin ako nasabutan nga kanang sa inyo nga specific date, a period of time na inyo na barya dyan ka kato nga yung muhang. Pero pag sa gara na kung for example ang imuhang debt capital is inyong sabutan mga 5 years, mga ilan nakadugay dito ang inyong hangkuan kanang long term na ba inyong ang year na inyong nasabutan, pwede na siya magka-interest. So, debt financing can be either short-term or long-term with full and timely disposal of investment first presented and investigated. So, syempre, kay debt capital ba, may capital man mo, pero yung utang pa siya mo, dapat i-secure kung di mo nga pa na siya, okay na siya ni mo tagon, ay okay na siya ni mo nga kanang paano bitaw mo siyang very imo sang i-secure dira nang sulod mo security nga ano mo Brigi. In exchange for a share of ownership in the company.
Ay, so it means ang equity capital, for example, kung mamutan ko, example, si ikaw, mamutan ka sa ako, and then yung bayad is share sa yung company. It means kung mamutan ka sa ako, another part sa yung company, na share.
Equity financing allows the business to obtain funds without incurring debt or without having to repay a specific amount of money at a particular time. So, yan na siya. So, what is yung table sa debt, capital, o equity capital? So, manus talaga. Yung characteristics sa debt, kanay characteristic debt, kanay mo siya pagmukugan. Right. Sa capital mo siya. So, voice in management, no senior to equity. No senior to equity stated interest deduction. So, na. So the next reporter will be discuss the voice in management.
Okay, good afternoon. So my task is to report in voice in management. So unlike creditors, lenders, holders of equity capital, common and preferred stockholders are owners of the firm. Holders of common stock have voting rights that permit them to select the firm's directors and to vote on special issues. In contrast, debt holders and preferred stockholders may receive voting privileges only when the firm has violated its stated contractual obligations to them. Okay, Mr. Moligaya, do you have any idea about voice in management?
Pwede lang yan. Okay, so for me, from the word itself, voice in management, I think this is a kind of management where they value the voice of their employees. Example of this is like if your business or your company has needing the voice of your employees, new ideas, it means this management is sila yung hawak sa unsay yung mga idea ng mga like unsay mga idea sa mga sila ang mga employee. Like sila ang voice out sa atong mga employees.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Maligaya. And sa iyong mga idea, since iyan na din na elaborate yung tama, and okay, so claims on income and assets. So holders of equity have claims on both income and assets that are secondary to the claims of creditors, including both interest and scheduled principal payments. Once these claims have been satisfied, the firm board of directors decide whether to distribute dividends to the owners. The equity holders claim on assets of the firm also are secondary to the claims of creditors. If the firm fails, so assets are sold and proceeds are distributed in this order: employees and customers, the government, creditors, and so here is from the PPT. So if mag-fail daw ang firm is all the assets are sold and proceed in distributed in this order. So pati ang mga employees, customers, so ang imong firm is mag-fail ka ng siguro makawa. Yan na. Okay. So that's in equity capital. So holders are the last to receive any distribution of assets during bankruptcy proceedings. They expect greater returns from dividends and or increases in stock price. more risk because of this subordinate claims on income and assets. So despite being more costly, equity capital is necessary for the firm to grow. So all firms must initially be financed with some common and stock equity. So maturity. So unlike debt, equity is a permanent form of financing. It does not mature and will be liquidated only during bankruptcy proceedings. Though the owners must recognize that although already market basis for the firm shares, the price that can be realized may fluctuate. This potential fluctuation of the market price of equity makes the overall returns to a firm owners even more risky. So, na-mention na ni ko pag kanina nga, maturity. Kung ikaw ang makautang, is, nagtubo ka na siya din. Kung unsa yung nasabutan mo kanang date, umuhat na ka na, obliged ka na, bayad ka na kay. Siyempre, ikaw gusto mo ang peso. So tax treatment. So interest payments to debt holders are treated as tax one deductible expenses on the firm's income statement, whereas dividend payments to common and preferred stockholders are not tax deductible. The tax deductibility of interest lowers the cost of debt financing to be lower than the cost of equity financing. So, as I have understood in this, so tax treatment is when you are holding a company, dapat dun nga maghatag ka o tax para I don't know what's the purpose of tax. Okay, Mr. Maligaya, know what's the purpose of tax? What is the purpose of tax in company?
What do you mean with tax? Like government, why the company paying tax to the government?
Yes.
I think for you to have the security, of course. Like example, the other companies who do something like mga kaso-kaso, it means kung wala kayong mga papeles na dinapay, it means the other company will gonna win. Kaya wala man ka-dapay o mga taxes. And I think we as a Filipino, we as a individual of this country, like natugot na kami na yung tax, this is our responsibility to pay tax.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Maligaya. So, kung pala, for example, palit kita sa grocery sa magbayad, nakabayad po tayo ng tax. Bisa lang may kakenti. Nanatay tax, So, debt and equity as investment. So, investment in securities represent either a debt or an equity interest. Debt represents funds borrowed in exchange for receiving interest, income, and promise that the loan will be repaid at a given future date. From the word nga, will be repaid at a given future date. So, naagibig kasabutan kung ikaw ang utang, kung imong giutangan is na siya giingon nga, kanigalit dapat makabayad ka, kaya para saligan ka. So, equity represents a current ownership interest in a specific business or property. Typically, an investor obtains an equity interest in a business by buying securities collectively known as stock. So, debt securities are similar to bank loans in that corporation promises to pay the face value at the maturity date together with interest payments at regular intervals. So debt readjustment. So readjustment involves fundamental changes in the capital structure, such as changes in preferred stock positions, bonds, or the corporate structure of a parent company and its subsidiaries. So long-term debt, the amount of long-term debt on a company balance sheet is crucial. Okay, what do you think ang long-term debt is very crucial? So, sa kataas yung
nakuha sila, nagsinil, then ano sila, nagputas yung bayad, kaya namatay na lang ang kuloka. Ano? Wala yung papers, kaya service to mo, all the time.
Manang kita ang magkaon ng company dito. So the amount of long-term debt at the company balance sheet is your shell. So debt to equity ratio. The debt to equity ratio measures how much money a company should safely be able to borrow over a long period of time. It does this by comparing the company total debt, including short-term and long-term obligations, and dividing it by the amount of owner's equity. So profitable borrowing. So if a business can earn a higher rate of return than the corporation borrows, they promise to make regularly scheduled interest payments and repay the original amount borrowed. That is the principal. The person or firm making the loan is called a creditor or a lender. So profitable borrowing. So kung ikaw mangutangay na nang nagpautang sa mo, dapat unfair kayo ikaw pa interest mo. Wa ko ikaw tubo yung mga kwarta. So, pero kung ang pamutang na lang, sige gagawin mo iyakan, wala ibayad ang interest. Saan ko bayad?
Dapat ito ang nagbusak ba, ang
Siguro sa Manila ko, imana na.
Pero sa policy man ako, umasa ka ng tao. Sa bilis na silang
Pero kung sa putsul-putsul,
many times na kasuhan ka, many times na kung ano mga property, many times na interest ang mula.
So, the person or firm making the loan is called, madalas na yung magtawag na creditor or lender. So, that's all my part. I will give it to third reporter.
So I am Janelle, be Demolde, the third reporter, and I will be discussing the different types of debt. Typical debt securities are gold notes, debentures, or bonds. A debenture is an unsecured corporate debt, whereas a bond is secured by a mortgage on the corporate property. However, in common usage, the word bonds is used indiscriminately and often refers to both secured and unsecured debt. So, ang kuan ani, a note usually refers to an unsecured debt with maturity shorter than that of a debenture, perhaps less than 10 years. And kaning long-term debt is any obligation that is payable more than 1 year from the date it was originally issued. And sometimes long-term debt, debentures and bonds is called funded debt. And then, the different types of debt are repayments, seniority, security, and indenture. So, repayment, long-term debt is typically repaid in regular amounts over the life of the debt. That may be extinguished before maturity by a bond. Historically, almost all publicly issued corporate na po ang kaning repayment, which is the payment of a long-term by installment is called amortization. And then sunod kay seniority. In general terms, seniority indicates preference in position over other lenders. Some debt is subordinated. Usually, this means that the subordinated lenders will pay off only after the specified creditors have been compensated. However, debt cannot be subordinated to equity. And then the third is the security. Security is a form of attachment to property. It provides that the property can be sold in the event of default to satisfy the debt for which security is given. Indenture, the written agreement between the corporate debt issuer and the lender, setting forth maturity date, interest, and all other terms is called indenture. So, money some loans to remember. Some typical restrictive covenants are the following. So, number one, restrictions on further indebtedness. Number two, a maximum of the amount of dividends that can be paid. And three, a maximum level of working capital. Pero sa inyo mga sa June, mas kuan siya kayo sa types of debts. Security, kuan, repayment, seniority, ang pinaka-importante. Ang pinaka-importante sa types of debts. Ang repayment, seniority, security, or indenture. Indenture.
Kaya agreement na siya between sa production agreement ninyo, however, like for example, na wala ba ako, nakakutangan siya sa inyong agreement na naturally ka-support ko.
So, ang kuan, can cause of debt be reduced? As Philippines, senators are prone to say a billion here, a billion there. Pretty soon, it all adds up. Each of the costs of financial distress we mentioned above is substantial in its own right. However, it should be mentioned at the outset that the methods below can at most reduce the cost of debt. So, ma-reduce today the reduce siya. So, effect of agency cost of equity on debt financing. The change in the value of the firm is the tax shield on debt plus the reduction in the agency cost of equity minus the increase in the cost of financial distress, including the agency cost of debt. The optimal debt equity ratio would be higher in a world with agency cost of equity than in a world without this cost. However, because the agency cost of debt are significant, the cost of equity do not imply 100% debt financing. Hindi siya mag-imply 100% debt financing. So, free cash flow. This simple idea of the free cash flow hypothesis has recently attracted the attention of academic community. This has important implications for capital structure. Since dividends leave the firm, they reduce free cash flow. So, in summary of the free cash flow, it provides another reason for firms to issue debt. For the cost equity, the equity dilutes the holding of managers with equity interest, increasing their motive to waste corporate resources. And that reduces free cash flow because the firm must make interest and principal payments. So that's all. And the next reporter will be discussing the Philippine capital market.
So once again, good afternoon. I am Rhaynamae Bañares. I will be discussing about the Philippine capital market. Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas Governor Rafael stated that the development of the local capital market has been the driving force of the government and the private sector since the opening of the Manila Stock Exchange in 1927. So, supad po ani nga time, numerous developments na sa market ang nahitabo. And then sa 1949, Bangko Sentral implemented and supported measures to strengthen the market. And then sa 1980, Central Bank of the Philippines institute financial reforms nga nag-remove sa kalahian among financial institution. And also another year, which is 1980, Central Bank implemented a number of measures to increase the yield of debt instruments by eliminating sa administrative ceilings on interest rates. And then sa 1986, the government securities network was mobilized and the auction system for treasury issues was installed. And during sa kanila period, ang Central Bank adopted a phase-out policy with regards to central bank bills. The Central Bank was also instrumental in the establishment of the Credit Information Bureau in 1982, which has provide vital credit information and help reduce risk involved in investment in capital market instrument. So, nag-provide siya ng vital credit information and nakatabang siya na ma-reduce ang risk na nag-involve sa investment sa capital market instrument. But it was the establishment of the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas in 1993 that gave the major boost to the development of the capital market in the country. So, the establishment of the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas sa 1993 naghatag siya og major boost bitaw sa development sa capital market sa country. And then the complete transfer of the Bangko Sentral fiscal functions to the Bureau of Treasury in 1998 signaled the shift of the public debt management function to the Finance Department and the strengthening of the Bangko Sentral monetary policy independence. So, ang kumplito na nga pag-transfer na sa Bangko Sentral fiscal function sa transfer sa Bureau of Treasury in 1998 nung nag-signal siya nag-shift siya o public debt management. Function siya sa Finance Department. And then naghatag siya nag-strengthen po siya sa Bangko Sentral monetary policy independence. And then there are two ways for companies to raise money for long-term business investment. They can borrow it or they can issue shares, otherwise known as stocks. So, ito ways sa companies nga mag-raise siya money for long-term business investment. Kanang pwede nyo mahulang or mag-issue siya nga shares or kanang known as stocks. In the world of corporate finance, stocks are called equity capital and borrowed money is debt capital. So, sa world of corporate finance, ang stock ay tawag siya og equity capital. So, money ang equity capital, ang tawag ng stocks. And then, ang borrowed money is debt capital. Debt. Equity or stocks or shares differs fundamentally from debt in in that it represents an ownership interest in a company, not lending the company money. And for investors, this fundamental distinction has two important implications. So, nasa duha ka fundamental distinction. So, ang una is an equity holder is not entitled to any regular payment. So, if you lend company money or buy its debt securities, you are entitled na regular interest payment. So, matawag na siya o kanang regular interest payment. And then sa second, an equity holder is not entitled to the repayment of their investment. So, if one lends company money or buy its debt securities, he is entitled to the repayment of that loan at some predetermined rate in the future. So, mga siya ang duha ka important applications. Source of capital. The capital needed to put up a business may come from two general sources. So, ang capital na kinahanglan siya para makaput up sa business, gikan siya sa two general sources. So na ay duha ka general sources. So, una, internal. This is the capital raised from within the firm itself that may come from the owner contribution, retained earnings, and then third is depreciation allowance. So, ang una nga general source is internal. So, kano siya, mga classes, kanang ang capital kay raised from ito siya within the firm itself. So, kanang work sa imuhang own, sa imuhang bang kaulit ng business. So, sa imuhang company, kanang naarahan yung biguha ang kapitahan yung i-raise ang imuhang capital. Ngayon, siya sa owner contribution. So, balik kanang naapa ang owner na kahit na-contribute. So, mga na internal or kanang retained earnings or kanang depreciation allowance. So, ang depreciation allowance, a fund set aside by the company to allow the decrease in value of its fixed asset. The yearly depreciation allowance set by the company may be computed in two ways. So, patong na may type internal no, ang una kay kuan ka ng owner ba, anong contribution ba sa owner, ano na ikaduha ka ng rating ba sa rating earnings ba, or ang ito depreciation allowance. So, ang depreciation allowance yearly set by the company. So, isa siya sa company may be computed in two ways. So, pwede siya ma-compute in two ways. So, una, the straight line method, where the amount of depreciation is equal. So, ang unang nga klase sa pag-compute, kanang straight line method, grabe ang pamaagi nga, where the amount niya ay equal na siya. And then, yung ikaduha is the moving average method, where the depreciation allowance varies from year to year at a declining rate over the asset production life. So, moving average method ang usa ka ways sa pag-compute sa depreciation allowance. And then, ang ikaduha nga, so ang ikaduha nga general sources sa capital, ang ikaduha sa sources sa capital is external. Ang una, internal, so karon external. External when internal sources prove to be insufficient for the business capital needs. An investor may avail funds from outside the company. So, ang internal, di ba, is kanang nakuha ng kapital sa sulod sa imong company, sa sulod sa imong business. So, while ang external, magamit na niya siya nga source sa capital if mag-prove na ang imong company or ang imong business dili dito maka-provide for capital, like insufficient siya for the business capital needs. So, nagkulang siya sa kinahanglan sa business. So, an investor may avail funds from outside the company. So, magkuha na sila sa gawa silang company like company. So mao ang external. And then the most common sources of loans for the businessman are the following. Una, commercial banks. These banks grant mainly short-term loans, usually traders and merchants to finance the exchange of goods in the domestic and international markets. So, ang commercial banks, mao siyang kanang bangko nga kanang short-term or bitaw ang pamagi sa loan. Kanang usually trader and merchants lang nag-finance and then mag-exchange siya of goods in the domestic and international markets. And then sa ikaduha, thrift banks. These banks usually encourage thrift among small depositors and extend loans at reasonable interest rates. So, kani siya nag-encourage siya og kalahian among small ginagmay lang nga depositors and maka-extend siya og loans kung naay kanang kanang valid so kanang reasonable interest rates kanang ang iyang interest reasonable siya. And then next is rural banks. Rural banks are banks that cater to the needs of small farmers and merchants in the rural areas. So ang rural banks mo siyang bank na nag-cater sa mga pangunahang sa mga small farmers, mga ginagmay lang mga farmers and then merchants. And then other private financial institutions like pawn shop, investment banks, finance companies, insurance companies, and investment companies. So mo siya ang other private financial institution. So underdeveloped capital. So market, the low savings rate of the Philippines is also a reflection of weaknesses in the non-bank sectors of the capital market. So ang low saving rate sa Philippines nag-reflect siya or reflection siya kanang kahinaan sa non-bank sectors sa capital market. So capital market development, the development of the capital market is critical to raising the domestic savings. So ang development sa capital market is kanang very critical siya in raising sa domestic savings. So the capital market shall be depend through na pamaagi na kanang dapat matipid mapalalo sa bibitaw ang capital market through first the elimination of taxes that serve as disincentives to the development of the capital market. So muna siya muna elimination ng pagtamtak sa mga taxes na nag-serve as disincentives rather to the development of the capital market. And then sa second, the use of new and creative debt and equity instruments. So ang ikaduhay ka ng gamit sa pag-ungang pag-u and then creative siya nga debt. And then sa ikatulo, expansion of institutional players. And the last is financial taxation. The gross receipts tax or GRT. So ang meaning sa GRT kay gross receipt tax imposed on banks and other credit institutions. The VAT on green companies and other contractual saving institutions, and the premium tax on life insurance companies will be replaced by financial institution tax known as